excited to be here today. Come on. Yeah. So welcome as we continue on with our Rev Up, Renew, and Restore series. Today's kind of a special day for a couple of reasons. Number one, our Bethalto campus is going to be joining us via video today. So let's welcome our Bethalto campus. Yes. But also we have some special guests, and I'll introduce them here in just a second, but they're going to kind of continue on. We've been in this series for a few weeks now, and we've been talking about marriage. We've sort of been talking about it in the context of cars, and we started things off, we talked about the new car smell, and how nothing really beats that. But the reality is none of us really come from the new car lot because we're all sort of broken and dinged up a little bit. But if we want our vehicles to kind of stand the test of time, we want it to go the long haul, we want to get the most out of those vehicles, we've got to maintain things, we've got to constantly be working on changing the oil, we've got to constantly be doing those little things, those things that we did in the beginning to fall in love are the same things we need to continue doing if we want to stay in love. But we're really focused on how to turn these marriages that we have into something great. Not just something that we settle for, but something amazing, something that stands the test of time, something that's really a classic. But no matter how strong our marriages are, no matter how much care we take of them, there are things that happen to us that we have to fix. We get dinged, we get dented up along the way, and we have to really focus on fixing what is broken, no matter how much we focus on our marriage. And so, Justin and Trisha Davis have a story about some dings and dents, and honestly probably some pretty deep dents and gashes, but they have an amazing story of how God revved up, renewed, and restored something that was broken into something that was amazing. And so they're going to come up here and they're going to share part of their story with you. And so please welcome to the stage this morning Justin and Trisha Davis.
Well, good morning.
Brother's got a hug. How are you guys? Great. Good. Well, we're so excited to be here with you guys. I want to say a special welcome to the Bethalto campus. So honored to be able to join you guys in your worship service today. And we're Justin and Trisha Davis, and we've been able to spend the weekend with you guys, and we get to travel around to a lot of different churches and a lot of different cities. And over the last couple of days, man, it's just been so apparent that God is up to something big and something special in this community and in your church. And so we're just honored to be able to share the few moments that we have this morning with you guys. And as we've just been talking to Pastor Lance about where you guys have been as a church and where you guys are going as a church, man, I just know that the best is yet to come. And so we're just really excited to be a part of it.
So before we dive in, we just wanted you to get to know us a little bit as we get to know you. Justin and I have been married for 20 years. Woo!
We got married when we were 12. That's not true, but I really wish that it was.
I said that on Friday, and my hope is, if I'm honest, y'all will go, oh, she's too young. Whatever. You didn't do it. You didn't do it on Friday. You didn't do it this morning. It's fine. I know. You're my favorite. And so we've been married for 20 years. We have 3 boys. Our oldest, Micah, is he's 19. I'm having a hard time with that too. He just left for college, and so we're not talking about parenting yet.
Picture of him.
Yeah. They're all single, and so Micah just left for college, and we're not talking about parenting because we can't say it yet without crying. But pray for us.
I'm following him on Snapchat just so I can keep up with all the things that he's doing at college, and so
every high schooler was
I'm
just
stalking. I'm a 42-year-old man stalking my son on Snapchat. It's awesome.
Yeah. Again, we're not talking about parenting. And so our middle son Elijah, he's 16. He is our old soul, but he also has ADD. So he's the most fun person to be around. If you really want to know what's going on in the Davis household, follow him on Instagram because he'll put up pictures. I'm like, dude, did you not see the 6 loads of laundry behind you doing your little selfie? And so he's just real raw and honest. And then our youngest, Isaiah, he is 12 years old, but we call him our gentle giant because he is about 6'1" now as 12, and so I have no little people. And so that's our family in a nutshell. Justin has been on staff at a church in Nashville, Tennessee over the past 6 years where he played the role of a campus pastor, and then 7 weeks ago we moved to Indianapolis, Indiana to plant Hope City Church. And you're going to kind of hear that story unfold, but knowing that we are church planters, we are rocking it. We have no people, no building, and really little money, so it's right now.
Yeah. We've been like taking in all that you guys do here at this campus, because we're like going to copy off of you as we launch our church next year.
I'm just kidding. We do have a great group of people that have joined us, and so it's just so fun and sweet to be in this environment and what you all do to create a space that this was a school on Friday. And today, this morning, we hope that God meets all of us in this place.
And so as we go through this morning, we're going to share a little bit of our story with you. If you were here at the marriage conference this weekend, some of the stories might be a little familiar. Just pretend like you haven't heard them and laugh anyway. And but if you weren't here, or even if you were here this weekend, we're going to share some new content with you, just to hopefully allow you to find yourself in our story, because the reality is all of us have a story, and God is passionately pursuing us and longing to meet us right where we're at and move us beyond where we're at, closer to where He longs for us to be. And so that's our hope and prayer today.
And so if you're here and you're single or you're a student and you're like, oh, let the marriage series end, right? We hope that you will lean in with us, because as Justin said, we all have a story. Like, we're all dreamers. In fact, how many students do we have in the room? Raise your hand. High school? She's like, what? Right?
Why do we have to raise
I love teenagers. I think you guys are amazing. And what I love about students is that if you want to be around dreamers, rub elbows with students. Like, no other time in your life are you put in a place where you can just dream big dreams and be supported in them. So I love students. And Justin and I, we were no different. We met in college back in '93. Yeah, I know, so unfortunate.
1993, not 1893.
I know, 1993, and that's where our story and our dreams unfolded. We met in Bible college, and we found love, and we got engaged and we got married in '95, which is even more unfortunate. Anybody get married in the '90s? Yeah, see, they're very slow to raise your hand, because getting married in the '90s meant big, ginormous, bedazzled dresses, right? And so my wedding veil, those desert lizards that get mad? They're like, that was my wedding veil. Do we have that picture? See, my friend Brooke is like being attacked by the whole outfit. But that was the dream, right? We all have a dream for what our life will look like. But more than a wedding day, Justin and I had this epic dream for a honeymoon. We both grew up in lower income families. The one place that I went to on vacation as a kid, I was 9 years old, was Wisconsin Dells. Anyone been to the Dells? Oh, that's so sweet. I know I'm close to the north. Usually it's like crickets. And the one place that Justin, actually, he went on 2 vacations. His first vacation was to St. Louis. Hello. Yes.
I went up on the arch. It transformed my life.
Yes. But then he got to experience his second vacation. It was Holden Beach, North Carolina. So as a young engaged couple ready to get married, we had to decide if we were going to the Dells or the beach. And the beach won out. The problem was we were going to get married in my home city just south of Chicago, and you guys are all smart to know that Chicago is not near the Carolinas, and so we thought, let's get through the wedding day. We will stay at a hotel just a couple hours away, so we're not near family, and then we'll make the long trip the rest of the day. What we were so excited about is that Justin's parents got their first brand new ever car, like the first brand new car they'd ever owned in their adult life. And we were going to get to use it for the honeymoon. It was the sexiest 1995 Astra minivan you had ever seen. It was teal. Young ones, just Google it. It will change your life. It's pretty fantastic. And so we get in this car and we're like, oh, we're going to get there in 3 hours. And then 5 hours later, we realize that there's an accident and this is not good. And so about 8 hours later, we get to the hotel room. And we have this vision of he's going to carry me over the threshold. And I was like, dude, you need to get to Stephen. You need to get out of my way. Because I got to get out of this dress and go to sleep. I'm really tired.
And sleep was the operative word there. I was like, let's call time out here. I didn't get married to go to sleep. Sleep wasn't in my contract, right? I got married for some action. So let's light a candle. Let's throw on some Boys to Men. But let's get this party started.
Yeah. And so, as he was trying to get the party started, I know students, you're like, where is this going? I promise, just hang in there with me.
I'm just glad the other kids left.
Yes. Knocks on the door, and not only am I crying, but I am sobbing, and the only thing I can get out of my mouth is like, I need you to go to Walmart. Like, right now, I need you to go to Walmart.
And I'm 21 years old, right? So I'm thinking, why would I go to Walmart at 4 o'clock in the morning in my tuxedo on my wedding night? Well, apparently, as we arrived at the hotel, something else arrived for Trish. And so I have a sister. I've never experienced that with her, right? And so I realized I'm walking down 2 aisles in one day. The feminine product aisle really is to say I'm not so sure, right? And so I get to Walmart, and I've never bought this before, and so I just pick one of everything. And you're in a bad place in your life when the person working the 4 a.m. shift at Walmart feels sorry for you, right? And so I throw everything up on the conveyor belt. I'm like, please, no questions, just check me out. My wife is eagerly anticipating my arrival at the hotel.
I was totally asleep when he got back, and so we get up the
What
next
she's trying to say is no action, zero, nada.
You're freaking everybody out. So we get up the next morning, we make the long trip to the beach, and we are so excited. We are 20 and 21 years old. That when we see the ocean water, we just drop our bags and start playing in the water for the next 3 hours. And a little unknown fact about me, oh mercy, you want me to use another mic? You want me to grab one? Yeah? No?
Crickets.
Who's the man on the stage? All right. Check 1, 2. Check. There we go. Awesome. Let me turn this off. Okay, so back to the beach. It's about to get really epic for all of you. We're at the beach. And this is, I'm going to let you know, like you should respond at this part as you didn't in the very beginning when I said I've been married for 20 years. But something that I think is very evident about me that people are often surprised is that I'm Hispanic. What? Oh, that was great. Okay. So, even though being a fair-skinned Latino, I don't ever remember getting like a sunburn, like a blister burn. But you all know something, well, maybe Justin thinks this is the South. This is not the South. The sun in the South is different, and so after 3 hours of being in the ocean water, I was sunburned, like from head to toe, blister burned, like don't touch me. I finally looked at him and I'm like, baby, maybe you just shouldn't look at me because your breathing on me is like really bothering me.
Like for the next 3 days, nothing touched her body but aloe vera, right? And it's an epically bad honeymoon when you're calling your dad collect, because that's what you do in 1995. Some of you need to Google what a collect call is. And you're talking to your father on your honeymoon about the action you're not having. It's a very awkward conversation, right? And my dad's like, 4 days and no action? I'm like, nothing at all. She's sunburned, I can't even touch her. He's like, you know what? We're not even Catholic, but I think you're gonna know that. Just high five and walk away.
Awesome. Okay, so before you feel really bad for him, on our very last day of our honeymoon, we had all this money, so I thought, I could take, my skin could take the sun, that I could rent a jet ski, because renting a jet ski for a 21-year-old groom with lots of pent-up energy is very wise. And so this is the moment in the relationship, and this goes beyond marital status. Students, you know who you are in your family, who the rule follower is and who the rule breakers. So who are my rule followers? Raise your hand. Yeah, you're so sweet.
They feel intimidated even raising their hand in church right now.
Who are my rule breakers?
Woo!
Right?
Yeah.
Of course. So
they're all toward the back. All the rule breakers are usually in the back.
Watch that area right there. Okay, so Justin and I, we get on this jet ski. He's in the front, I'm behind, and I'd like to go over the rules of the jet ski, because that's just only normal. And so we take off, and the moment happens. That moment where like time stands still and everybody's moving real slow, and in these next moments you're like, I'm gonna die. Like, this is not good. There's this huge party yacht coming into the cove, and it has happy people on it, and there's music playing, and this party yacht is creating huge waves. And Justin's like, oh yes. And I'm like, oh, no. And so before I could say anything, we head towards the party yacht. We hit the waves so hard, so fast, that I go flying like 30 feet in the air, to the point I was like, what's up? The people on the party yacht. And then I just land in a belly flop position. And when I came up, all my blisters had popped.
Yeah. It was payback. The Lord was watching out for me, because he was just like, see, I gave you something to get back at your wife. No, I'm just joking. It wasn't an act of God. Maybe it was.
Here's the deal. If you're engaged, I'm sorry, that's not usually how it rolls. But here's the deal. If we're really honest, regardless of your age, if you're 8 or you're 80, we have this vision of what we think our life is going to look like. And Justin and I had this firm foundation that we believed that if we loved God and then we loved each other, that life would be easy peasy. That if we loved God and we loved each other, that He would protect us from heartache. He would protect our dreams, and that everything would come into fruition. Our life would just go up and to the right.
And so we got married the summer before my second senior year of college. I don't know about you, but I squeezed 4 years into 5. And I'm just praying that my kids don't do that right now. And so here we are, we're young, we're in love, we're in college, we're broke. And then 4 months into marriage, we realized that Trish doesn't have the flu like we thought she did, but she was pregnant. And so I must have got something figured out along the way. And so I was studying youth ministry. I was going to go into youth ministry. And so I graduate in May. We moved to our very first student ministry. And then a couple months later, our child was born, 5 days after our first year anniversary. And so we're new in ministry. We're new parents. And we had this dream and this vision that we wanted to change the world through the local church. That we felt like God had set us apart. God had given us a vision for ministry, and we just wanted to live that out. And so for the next 7 years, we did student ministry at a couple of different churches. But 7 years into marriage and ministry, we had this burning passion to start a church for people who don't go to church. And so we moved to the northeast side of Indianapolis, and we had $5,000 to our name. We knew like 4 people in the town that we were moving to, and we thought, man, by the time we run out of this money, we should have a church going, which sounds like a really faith-filled step. It's actually a stupid way to start a church. I do not recommend that, but God showed up. And so we moved on June 1st, 2002, and on June 9th, we had our very first service, and 12 people showed up. Now, as a church planner, you're looking for any sign at all that God may be remotely in this. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, 12 people, 12 disciples. This is biblical, right? Like God is all over this. 3 of these people have on sandals, and Jesus wore sandals. This is anointed, right? It's going to happen. And so actually they came back the next week. It was amazing. And over the next few months, those 12 turned into 20, and 20 grew into 25. And then a couple of churches in our area started partnering with us, and they gave us free meeting space and office space, and they allowed me to speak. And they told their people to leave and go with us. And we launched public services in September of 2003 with over 250 people that showed up for our very first service. But more than just the numbers, right? There was this sense of all that we were dreaming about and all that we had a vision for and all that we planned for, like, was coming into fruition. Like God was showing up in ways that we couldn't have even imagined, and people were finding Christ, and they were finding a home in our small group ministry, and they were going on mission trips, and they were giving back to God in generous ways, and they were using their giftedness to serve the poor and the forgotten and the marginalized. And everything that we had dreamed about, God was allowing to happen. And so over the next 18 months, we grew from 250 people to over 750 people by Easter of 2005. And from the outside looking in, it looked like we had everything together. We had this young, amazing church. We had really talented volunteers. We were really doing a lot of great things in our community. People in our community knew who this new church was. We just raised $1 million as a church that was less than 3 years old with an average age of 28 to buy the building that we were meeting in. It looked great from the outside. But on the inside, there was deficiencies in my faith and in my character, and there was definitely holes in our marriage relationship that began to rise to the surface. And even though everything was going up and to the right with the church, Trish and I were really drifting.
Yeah, I think for many of us, we have this idea, we have a vision for what we think our life will look like. We have these big dreams, and then we realize life is a little bit harder, and so we start looking to milestones, right? And if we can just achieve that career, if we can, just find our forever love and get married and have kids and get out of the apartment and get into a house. Like maybe for you as students, middle school was just awful, and you thought, man, if I could make the team in high school, if I can make varsity, we look to these things, these milestones and achievements, and we think that they'll make us whole. And that was Justin and I. We were no different. I mean, from the outside looking in, we looked like we had it all together. And in the time that we planted the church in 2002, statistically, 80% of churches that planted the way that we planted failed, closed the door. So the fact that we were achieving these goals, we had people all over the nation asking, how did you do that? How did you drop into this community not knowing anybody and have exploding numbers? And we didn't know. And what often happens is we start living for the dream rather than living who we are in Christ. And Justin and I, here we were with this healthy church plant, and we were so desperate for leaders because we were growing so fast that we decided to take a group of 40 leaders to a retreat. And it was like living out the book of Acts. I don't know if you've ever read the book of Acts. It's the story of the first church, and it just talks about how people just gave selflessly to each other. And this group of 40, they were excited. They were excited to lead different areas in the church. And I remember being in this room and Justin standing in front, he's casting vision, and it was just electric in the room. The problem was that I was sitting in the back, just looking at my husband and going, I don't even recognize this man. Somehow the achievement of being church planners made the church, the bride of Christ, feel like a mistress. That I was competing for Justin's time and attention, and I was just over it. And in that moment, I don't know if you've ever been in a dark place that you know that you are going to step into a path of health by confessing. Or you're going to step into a path where bitterness and resentment live. And I just thought to myself, who am I going to tell that I think that the bride of Christ is like a mistress? I'm the pastor's wife. I'm the senior pastor's wife. Have you ever been there where you just thought that you couldn't share the truth? That oftentimes the achievement and the goal seem more lustrous, they seem more favorable to follow rather than follow after your own heart and what God is convicting you in. And so for the next year, I would go to church. For the next year, I would play the role. For the next year, I would pray over people, and I would kiss babies because I love babies. Like, that's just part of who I am. But then I would leave church and resent those very people that I ministered to. So 2005, we're almost busting at the seams at like 800 people, and we decided it's our 10-year anniversary. We just need to get away. So we go on this cruise, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't even want to go with him. I'd rather go on the cruise by myself. Like, that's how dark I was. And then we go on this cruise, and y'all, it was like magical. We got on this boat, and there were no church members. No offense. Like, you guys are so much better, right? You know, there was no cell phone. There was no laptop. There was no one to compete for Justin's time and attention. And I fell in love with him head over heels. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm healed. Like, I don't even just like him. Like, I'm in love with him. I'm having so much fun. We haven't laughed like this in years. The problem was that the cruise ended, and when the cruise ended, we stepped right back into the same patterns. We stepped back into the same life where I realized that the cruise was just a dream. It wasn't real life. And from that moment on, instead of turning to the heart of God and confessing and getting help, I just spiraled into this person that became so bitter that I became blinded to the wounds that I was causing in my own marriage relationship, in my relationship with my kids, my relationship with my church family.
You know what the cruise allowed us to do is it allowed us to treat the symptoms of our marriage problems without really having to address the problems themselves. Okay, we were experiencing all of this pain in our marriage relationship, and both of us knew that it was there. And so we go on this cruise, and it was almost like a prescription was written that just took away the pain. So the pain of our problems dissipated, so we never really had to identify the cause of that pain. And so when we came back from the cruise, we fell back right into the same behavior patterns, right back into the same scheduling conflicts, right back into the same short tempers, right back into the same arguments and frustrations. And there was this alarming gap between the marriage that we had and the marriage that we thought we would have. Have you ever experienced that gap in your life? Maybe for some of you today, there's this gap between the job that you have and the career that you thought you would have. And you're in your mid-30s, and you wake up every day and you go to work, but you don't really enjoy it. And there's this gap, right, between what you do and what you thought you would do. Maybe for some of you, there's a gap between the mom that you are and the mom that you thought you would be when you had kids. And you had it romanticized in your mind that you were going to be this amazing Martha Stewart mom, and your kids stress you out. And they keep you up. And they cause you to be somebody that you swore that you would never be. And so there's this gap, right? How do you close that gap? How do you reconcile that gap? Maybe for some of you, there's a gap between the relationship with God that you have and the relationship with God you pretend you have. And you come into church and you raise your hands and you sing the songs, but in your heart you know that you're not the person that everybody thinks that you are. And you have no idea how to close that gap. Maybe for some of you today, there's a gap between the marriage that you have and the marriage that you thought you would have. And you stood at an altar and you said, I do, and you had this dream and this vision of what marriage is going to be, and it just has fallen so incredibly short. And you live with this sense of disappointment, and you live with this resigning feeling of this is as good as it's going to be. How do you close that gap? That's where Trisha and I found ourselves 10 years into marriage, and we had this belief that longer married would equal a better marriage. The longer that we're married, the better our marriage is going to be. But here we are 10 years into marriage, and longer married didn't equal better marriage for us. Longer married meant louder arguments. Longer married meant more frustration. Longer married meant shorter tempers. Longer married meant the same argument over and over and over again. And all this culminated on October 9th, 2005. I came home from church, and Trisha was laying down for an afternoon nap, and I said, hey, we need to have a conversation. She said, okay, about what? I said, about us. And she's like, well, what about us? I said, I'm done. She said, you're done with what? And I said, I'm done with you. Like, I'm out. I don't want to be married anymore. I don't want to be in ministry anymore. I'm not in love with you anymore. I'm having an affair. It's with your best friend. I want to be with her. Like, I'm done. And I wish 10 years later, almost to the day, that it was a confession of remorse. And I wish it was a confession of repentance. It was simply a confession of resignation. When Trisha and I first got married, we were amazing at fighting for each other. And then over the next 10 years, we became experts at fighting with each other. And now I was just done fighting. Obviously, the intensity of our conversation went way up, and Trisha left the house, and it felt like 30 seconds later, I get a call from the chairman of our elders, and I just remember him screaming at me on the phone, this is some kind of sick joke. Please tell me this is a joke. And I told him to invite all of the board over to our house, and I stood at my front door handing out my resignation letter like a bulletin on Sunday morning. Cold-hearted. These guys, 3 of whom had helped us start the church, 7 of them sat in our living room trying to talk me out of not the consequences of my choices, but the choice itself to leave my wife and my 3 boys. And I was just in a dark place. One guy in the room had given $250,000 to our capital campaign. And I had cheated on all of them too. A few hours later, Trisha called the house. She didn't want me there anymore. I really didn't have a plan after that, so I went and checked into a hotel. And as I arrived at the hotel, a lady from our church called, and she said, if you have any hope at all of restoring your marriage, you're going to show up at this counseling appointment that we've made for you tomorrow. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have anything to do on a Monday, and so I went to this counseling appointment rather reluctantly, defiantly. I sat down in the counselor's office, and she knew a little bit of our story, and I shared some of the details with her that I've shared with you today, and she said, what do you hope to accomplish? Like, what do you want to get out of this counseling session? And I said, you know what, if I'm just really being honest with you, if I just kind of cut through all the Christianese, here's what I want you to help me figure out. I want you to help me figure out how God is going to bless my life no matter who I choose. Like, that's what I really want. And she said something in that moment that became a linchpin for the restoration process that God would take us on. She said, I can help broken people. I can't help hard-hearted people. And I'd been a Christian since I was 10 years old. I'd been in ministry for 10 years. I really didn't know what brokenness was. And over the next few days, God would begin to break my heart, not just for the consequences of my choices, but for the choice itself. Trisha and I didn't speak for the next 10 days. We were separated for 2.5 months. And she packed up all of my stuff and moved it in with a family that had helped us start the church. I started going to counseling by myself for the next 3 days that week and 4 days the following week. I went to counseling every day except for Friday because the counseling center was closed. On the 10th day of separation, Trisha called me on my cell phone and she said, I hear you've been going to counseling. And I said, yes. And she said, well, I'm willing to go with you. And so we started going to counseling a few days later, and we went 4 days a week for the next 2 months. So we tell couples all the time, if you feel like your marriage is in trouble, if you feel a little hopeless in your marriage, our counselor wanted to see us 4 days a week, okay? That's how jacked up we were. There's hope for you. Just hang in there. It's going to be fine. But God began to use those counseling sessions to peel back layers of frustration and layers of brokenness. And layers of dysfunction that we hadn't taken the time or really had the courage to talk about it, and began a restoration process that continues to this day.
Obviously, there's a lot in the story that gets left out that we can share in 30 minutes. And I think for all of us, when we hit that crossroads, it was an opportunity for me to leave, or an opportunity for me to lean in. And there's a passage found in Hebrews chapter 12. It starts with verse 10, and it says this: "For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best that they knew how. But God's discipline is always right and good for us, because it means we will share in His holiness." It goes on to say that no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterwards, there'll be a quiet harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So take a new grip with your tired hands and stand firm on your shaky legs. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Then those who follow you, though they are weak and lame, they will not stumble and fall, but will become strong. And here's the deal. All of us have wounds. All of us have our own story. And I had an opportunity, if I would continue to just focus on the affair. The affair is the bomb that we dropped. The affair is what gets people's attention. The affair is what got our attention. But the affair was a symptom of much greater issues in our marriage relationship. And leaning into God's discipline for my life meant letting go of my rights. And when I let go of my rights, I allowed the whole part of my heart to be seen, and allow God to start working in my life. And that's why we wrote the book Beyond Ordinary. It's not a book about how to affair-proof your marriage. It's not a book about 5 happy hops. It's a book of how do you go from a broken, burned-out pastor, separated, to having a marriage that really, and not just a marriage, but relationships that go beyond ordinary. And there's so many things that we wish that we could share with you. We're over time as it is, but the 2 things that I think that have meant the most to us is what we want to leave you with. The 2 things that we believe isn't the starting line, and not just the finish line. It's the starting line of what it looks like to live a life beyond ordinary. And here's the deal: beyond ordinary isn't living this extravagant, you do everything right and you're the golden child. Living beyond ordinary is choosing to do the right thing in the mundane. It's choosing to value yourself in the midst of those hard mom days. Choosing to value yourself when you know that your marriage is on the rocks. Choosing to value yourself when you know that you're not in the in crowd. How do you begin to live life that looks full and full of life? A life that goes beyond the ordinary parts of who we are.
You know, one of the things that we realized when we were writing the book, and we never really set out to do that, is just a door that God opened, is that long before the affair, we had an ordinary marriage. And an ordinary marriage is simply an overflow of an ordinary relationship with God. And for those of you that aren't even married, you can't expect anything in your life to be extraordinary if your relationship with God is ordinary. And so it doesn't matter if you're married, single, married again, single again. It doesn't matter what your marital status is. We wanted to share 2 principles with you that have kind of shaped who we are, and hopefully will allow you to repair the dings and the dents that you experience in your relational world going forward. And the first is this: that ordinary is defeated as we tell the truth. Ordinary is defeated when we tell the truth. I mentioned that we started going to counseling, went to counseling 4 days a week, and so 30 days into counseling, we had made a lot of progress. I had circled a date on the calendar when I was going to be able to move back home. We were really excited about it. We were going to renew our vows. It was going to be this amazing thing. And our counselor said, you guys have made a lot of progress, but you're at a really critical stage in your recovery. He said, you're 30 days in and trust is starting to be rebuilt. Trisha's starting to believe some of the things that you said. And so if you've left anything out, now is the time to share it. He said, unconfessed sin always leads to repeated behavior. And so if you don't want to be back here in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years or 13 years, now's the time to confess. And I knew in my heart I had left things out. And I came to this crossroads where I was going to lean into God's discipline, where I was going to allow God to mold me and shape me as a person, as a man, not just as a husband, but to be the person that God had called me to be. And so I sat Trisha down and I said, hey, as far as the affair goes, I've told you everything, but I have more to tell you. I said I was sexually abused when I was a kid, and I've never told anyone about it. I've never gotten help for it. There's a broken part of me that I can't fix. And it doesn't excuse my behavior. I'm just trying to understand how I got so far away from who I thought I was and who I wanted to be. And I want to find help and healing for that part of my heart that's wounded. And I said, I've struggled with pornography for the last 10 years, and I've deflected it, and I've denied it, and I've preached against it, and I've counseled people through it. But there's a part of me that's just broken. There's a part of me that I just need to confess, and I need to find healing and freedom from that. And I know it doesn't end here, I know, but this is the beginning of that process. And I said, if you don't want anything to do with me, if you want a divorce, you can have everything. This isn't about our marriage anymore. This is about me being a right person, me being a truthful person, me being somebody who can have integrity moving forward. And in an act of grace and mercy, unlike anything I'd ever seen, she said, now we can start over. Now we can begin again because I finally know the real you. And here's what I've learned over the last several years is, as we've talked about this and as I've looked at my own heart, is that all of us have this desire to have amazing relationships, right? We all have a desire to have amazing friendships. We all have a desire to have amazing marriages. And we don't compromise truth in relationships because we want to be liars. We compromise truth in relationships because we want to be loved. Right? And so we attach a pain quotient to every relationship we have, and we think, okay, that's the amount of truth this relationship can handle, so that's the amount of truth I'm going to give them. And so in our marriage relationship, I wasn't holding these things from Trish because I wanted to hurt her. I was withholding these things from Trish because in my mind, I thought I was protecting her. But what I was actually doing is I was killing our relationship slowly because God created us for intimacy. And the word intimacy means to be fully known. And God longs for you to be fully known by Him and fully known by your spouse if you're married. And so every time you compromise truth in a relationship, you limit the amount of intimacy that relationship is capable of experiencing. Jesus says in the New Testament, He says the truth will set you free. What He conveniently leaves out is it will probably make you miserable first. But what I've realized is that short-term misery for long-term freedom is a trade worth making. And that God longs for you to be in a relationship with Him where you don't have to hide, you don't have to pretend, you don't have to fake. You can be in a relationship that is fully authentic and transparent. And here's the deal. You don't have to be transparent with everyone. That would be creepy, okay? But you need to be transparent with someone. And people ask me all the time, how can you be a pastor and struggle with pornography and cheat on your wife? How's that even possible? Didn't you have accountability in your life? I had an accountability partner I met with every Wednesday. I had a church planning coach I met with every Tuesday. I just lied to them. See, accountability is only as good as the transparency you offer inside that accountability. And so I don't know where you're at today. I don't know where you're at in your relationship with God. I know that if you want to experience the extraordinary life that God came to give you and that He promises you, it starts with being a person of truth. And that He shows up and He heals your heart as you share truth with Him and with your spouse.
And lastly, and we close with this, is that ordinary is defeated when we choose to forgive. The ordinary is defeated when we choose to forgive. And here's the deal. I think that all of us want to be forgiving, right? I just think that for many of us, we just don't know how. And there's this famous passage found in Matthew where Jesus is having this conversation with His disciple Peter. And Peter asked Jesus, how many times do you need to forgive? And Peter throws out this number 7. He's pretty amazing. And what's so significant about that number 7 is that in the Bible, it talks about how the rabbis of that day said that you only had to forgive people 3 times and then they were done. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, we'd have no relationships, but you know how Austin would be like, this is your 3rd time you're out of my life? I mean, that would be great. But then Jesus responds not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And not because it was a mathematical equation, because Jesus knew something then that I was desperate to understand, that forgiveness is a process. Forgiveness is something you'll have to choose over and over again. And forgiveness begins when we feel the grief of our situation. When we feel the grief of our pain, what we're saying is we're stepping into our reality. We're not faking it anymore. And then out of that grief flows anger. And anger is a gift. Anger is what wakes us up to say we need to do something different. When we turned on our TVs this week and we saw the lives that were taken, you don't watch that and go, oh, that's a bummer. There's a righteous anger that causes you to want to be different. And what Jesus is asking us in the process of forgiveness, instead of being bitter, instead of being resentful, because resentment is like a cancer, it will affect all of your relationships. Bitterness sees beyond marital status. And you have to choose. You have to choose the life if you're going to hold on to your rights and you're going to build up this wall of bitterness that you're protected, sure, but you miss out on the life of freedom that God has you on the other side. So my question to you is, will you choose? Because if you're anything like me, I went to Bible college, I was married to a pastor, like, I get it, but there's moments in our walk where if we don't feel the grief, if we don't feel the anger, we miss out on God and we find ourselves yelling, God, you know what? You don't get it. Ever been there? Like, God, you don't understand what it's like to be betrayed when I didn't do anything wrong. You don't understand what it's like to pay for consequences when I tried really hard. You have no idea what it's like when I'm praying, I'm doing my devotional, I'm reading my Bible, and you are so absent. Like, I don't get it. Have you ever been there? Where faith almost becomes fake because it's something you do as opposed to who you are in Christ. And what I love about Jesus is that in that moment, he didn't scold me. He didn't yell at me. I just felt his presence speak into my heart and my mind to say, I do. I do, that we have a Jesus that knows what it's like to have best close friends who he did miracles with, who he changed the world with, and when he needed them the most, they were absent. We have a Jesus who hung on the cross in pain with thorns, a crown of thorns on his head, and he looked down, and the soldiers, they were gambling over his clothes, and his response in that moment was to shout out to God, God, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. We have a Jesus who hung on the cross and talked to the thief that deserved to be up there to say, because you believe in me, today you will be in paradise. That we have a Jesus who took on our sin. That in the moment he took on our sin, he cried out, my God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? At that moment, he had lived life with the Father, and because of us, he was separated. In that moment, Jesus saying, I do. That forgiveness, true forgiveness, is when we offer it, regardless of the person who hurt us, regardless of how they respond, because that's what Jesus did for us. It's what Jesus did for you. He chose you. He loves you. He redeemed you. And here's the deal. Forgiveness does not excuse a person's behavior. It prevents that behavior from destroying the person God's calling you to be. So will you choose? As we close this morning, I know that some of you, the person that you need to forgive isn't even alive. My prayer for you is that maybe the best thing you can do is sit down and write that personal letter and release that letter. Either burn it, do something, bury it, do something that allows you to tangibly say, I forgive you. Maybe for somebody in this room, you haven't walked with Jesus because you've already told yourself that you're not worthy, that you're the wounder, you're the person who hurt somebody. You don't deserve God's grace, and what you need to hear this morning is that the ground is level at the foot of the cross. We are all sinners in need of his grace. Will you choose? Because things that happen this week, the things that we see in this world, the brokenness where you feel like you are powerless, Jesus is saying, I came to seek and save. That you will live in abundance. And it begins with you, not your pastoral staff. It begins with you loving the people at your work. It begins with you loving the students that are marginalized at school. It begins with you believing that you're a great mom, even if your house is trashed all the time. It begins with you, the grandfather who has messed up with your adult kids, and you have an opportunity to do life again with your grandbabies. It begins with you. Will you choose? So I'm just going to ask you if you would just close your eyes in this moment. That this moment is not about the person next to you. It's not about being in church. It's not about pastoral staff. that you just close your eyes. And I want to give an opportunity for some of you. You've been trying. You've been trying to be truthful. You've been trying to be forgiving. You've been trying to love well, but it's not working. And I want to give you an opportunity, maybe for the first time, to say, it's not working because I'm doing it on my own will and strength, and I'm going to lean into your discipline, God. I'm going to choose you. I believe, Jesus, that you can change my life, and I've been running, but today I run no more. Today I run to you. And if that's you this morning, would you be brave? Would you choose today to say, I'm done. I'm so done. I want to find peace. I want to find rest. I want to find comfort that's found in a relationship with Jesus. If that's you this morning, would you be brave enough? Would you be brave enough to just stand? No one looking. This isn't a show. This is an opportunity for you to say, I want to tangibly remember today that I stand on the promise of who I am in Jesus Christ. That I believe that Jesus is who he says he is. Thank you, Jesus. For those of you standing, I just want you to ask, you can just say this inside, you can say it out loud, it's still quiet. But Jesus, I love you. I'm sorry for how I've been running, but I believe in you, and I believe that as I lean into you, that you will make me holy, and holiness is to be set apart. Jesus, I believe that you died for me, that you take my sins and you wash them white as snow. Jesus, I have no idea what it looks like to leave this place, but I'm trusting you're going to show up. Thank you, Jesus, for dying on the cross for me, for purchasing my freedom with your life. You can be seated. Father, I just thank you for this church. I thank you for this staff. I thank you for this space. Father, would we leave here to know that we just don't come to church. We are the church, and we have a hurting world that longs for us to just simply be who you called us to be. No platforms, no microphones, no Instagram followers, no Facebook likes, just simply confident that we are loved by you, that you chose us and you redeem us. That's our story. That's our legacy. That we are worth it because we are King, daughters and sons of the King. Thank you, Jesus, for showing up in the mess. Thank you for my own marriage. I thank you for my own children who watch our mess unfold and see you redeem over and over again. Thank you, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Guys, let's praise God for Justin and Trisha.